and welcome to the programme. Now, back on April the 21st, Ukrainians elected showman political newcomer Volodymyr Zelensky as their new president. Now, the following day, the business community was quick to provide a list of their expectations, really, it has for the newly elected president. So what priorities are they looking out for? Well, I'm pleased to say to discuss this and a lot more, we are joined in the studio today by Yaroslav Gregirchak, the Deputy Business Ombudsman for Ukraine. Hello, thank you so much for coming in.
Good to see you, Tom, again.
So, what are these priorities? Do you think we're going to see much of a change now that Mr. Zelensky is heading for Bankovo Street or wherever he's going to be?
Well, as far as business agenda is concerned, right, I guess the reference can be made to those requests that the newly elected made in between the first and second stage of the presidential elections towards the current incumbent. The program that newly elected has announced, and the certain directions in which the current incumbent president was trying to move the perception of the business climate. And interestingly enough, there are a few themes that are evident in all of those points. First, and that's kind of obvious if the one were to look into these three sources, is the idea of considerable reform to be implemented in the area of Ukrainian law enforcement agencies.
Oh, okay.
In particularly
into raids and this sort of thing? Or?
Well, the main idea is to take investigatory authority to investigate fiscal, customs, tax, and those economic crimes that is currently enjoyed by the State Security Service, National Police, and the other law enforcers, and accumulate it under the one roof, or the roof of a newly established law enforcement agency, which could be tentatively called National Bureau for Financial Investigations, or something common, something along these words. And ostensibly, if this were to be done, this would allow business to enjoy less pressure to be inflicted on it by law enforcers.
Yes, so a lot of the business community then will probably be looking out as to who is appointed to these very important positions in terms of the SBU, in terms of the prosecutor's office, that sort of thing.
That's another component of what definitely is within President's authority, according to our Constitution, is to appoint those candidates that will fill in the post of the Chief of the State Security Service, General Prosecutor, the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Because often these are positions that really need to be independent, away from political influence or oligarch influence, that sort of thing.
That's what is the task lying ahead of the newly elected president, to show and demonstrate not only to business, but to the entire constituency in this country, that the intention to bring in the standards of independency, fighting corruption, they are actually genuinely fulfilled in practice.
Yes, and the wheels are really already on, though, because over the past few years, Ukraine has been rising in international rankings, in the doing business rankings. It's gone up quite a number of places over the past few years. So the progress is already in motion. So basically what the business community is looking for is for it not to stop.
Of course, and that's where we get to talk as we are discussing the agenda ahead of the newly elected president. We've got to talk about the continuity of those good efforts that has been made by President Poroshenko in different fields. And from that perspective, business would like things not to change anyhow when it comes to, let's say, tackling the problem of the VAT refund, which has been evident, which has been tackled thanks to the good cooperation and synergy actually in between the such an institution as a president, cabinet of minister, prime minister himself, and Verkhovna Rada. And I mean, overall, with this demand for stability, predictability, and continuity, even though the Ukrainian round of elections has not finished yet, the hope is, and that would be a very nice message to the external world, that in between completed presidential elections and the elections to the parliament, actually these two institutions regardless of their current composition, will actually be trying to work together in order to facilitate agenda that has been promoted by President Poroshenko in a few fields that are related to business. For instance, those laws that are aimed at introducing mechanism or institute of authorized economic operators in customs, and some other fields where the business would like to see this sense of continuity. Both former, current incumbent and newly elected president, for instance, they talk about replacing corporate income tax with the repatriation tax to encourage reinvestment.
What's the difference between those two taxes?
The difference is that as a corporate entity, in the environment where you are subject to the repatriation tax, you are being taxed only if you are repatriating income generated by your entity in the form of, let's say, share, in the form of dividends or other mechanism that is employed to distribute the profit generated by the entity, which, if implemented, ostensibly should encourage businesses to reinvest earned funds into expanding the capital capacity and in improving the position occupied by the particular business in the economy.
And this also links to macroeconomic stability as well, because obviously at the moment the IMF is very active in Ukraine. They're still giving their tranches in support, and Ukraine has quite a bit to pay back this year, if I remember rightly. So this is also what business is looking at, the national bank, and they're looking at interest rates and exchange rates, I would imagine, as well.
Where we are talking about continuity of the political paths employed by Ukraine, macroeconomic stability, structural reforms. Of course, inevitably, we are in the field where the newly elected president has got to prove its willingness to continue proper cooperation with the BRD, with the International Monetary Fund, with the World Bank and other international financial institutions. Because, you know, the agenda with them has both purely economic business type of an issues, but also some others that are not related to the field of economy and investment climate per se, but if implemented, they would inadvertently bring positive flavor to the quality of cooperation between Ukraine and international financial institutions.
Can you give an example?
The illicit enrichment law. The idea about abolishing e-declarations for civil activists, those type of things that are not purely
sort of
economic.
Immunity and that sort of thing, maybe?
Well, the immunity as such is not, as far as I know, is not on the agenda, but I guess that's the part of the political agenda that could be employed by the by those that are currently incumbent to demonstrate the genuinity of their political will to change things in the country.
And do these sort of expectations change much within the business community in terms of the reforms, the priorities, or do they really stay on a level field? No, most businesses want the same thing. They just want to see structural reforms, and that's the main thing. Is that right?
It depends upon the business that we are talking about.
What are the main
actual
challenges,
sector.
would you say?
Well, the main challenges or main expectations is, as I have tried to sort of summarize from the outset, is reform of the law enforcement sphere with the appointment of the right candidates for the respective positions. The quality of the and independency of certain institutional infrastructure, where the president has a good say. For instance, National Bank, Anti-Monopoly Committee, certain sectoral regulators. If this is ensured, both through the tools available for the president and through the support to the particular individuals that are running those agencies, that brings the sense of, again, continuity and the level playing field for those that are currently in the market or those that are contemplating coming here. certain structural systemic reforms in the public procurement field, in the customs field.
So there's really a whole range of them.
You cannot expect from a business as such, because business is not a homogeneous phenomena. By the way, businesses are also represented by business associations, and they vary in terms of their constituency, their sectoral approach to analyzing things and making things preferable. This is not homogeneous indeed, and the set of issues that are relevant to this discussion is indeed quite complex.
I always think when you think of foreign business in Ukraine, you always think of huge multinational companies, and often these big business organizations would represent them. But also in Ukraine, there's a huge startup community as well. I think it's even bigger than Washington and Helsinki. So does your organization, do you work with them with giving advice and that sort of thing for startups, businesses that are entering new markets and that sort of thing?
Well, as a Business Ombudsman Council, we work with the instances of the business malpractice. Those situations when all types of businesses are facing all types of problems with all types of state authorities. So I wish my answer would be no, we don't work with them, because the negative answer means no problems. But actually, we work with all types of businesses, regardless of their geographical location, their size, their sectoral affiliation. About 80% of our complainants is small, medium-sized businesses.
And these are crucial as well, I would imagine. The small and medium-sized businesses are really powering the economy.
Of course, The level play field at the economy contemplates that as a result, you're going to have more and more where quality small and medium-sized businesses actually occupying this environment and making it more picturesome and more diversified, and therefore the whole economic structure of this country is likely to be more stable and beneficial.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I know after the Euromaidan revolution, for example, there was huge expectation for Ukraine that GDP should be 6 or 7%, but at the moment it's about 2 to 3%, if I'm not right, if I remember the latest figures. So what do businesses say about this particular figure? Do you think there's still too much expectation that these reforms can be done quicker or not?
Well, of course, you might expect following the revolution that there is a certain mismatch between those expectations that has been generated by those circumstances and the actual state of things. And the role is not to underestimate the level of institutional build-up that has been achieved. And actually that relates to this anti-corruption infrastructure that has been put in place. Thanks, among other things, to the current president. I'm talking about the National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, and kind of continuing with this discussion about the need to ensure continuity. Of course, the one notices the intention on the part of the newly elected president to sort of recharge the existing institutional skeleton by filling in those bodies with the newly
so the fresh faces, you could say,
something like that. Perhaps this is expected. But ultimately, if this is going to be done, this is going to send a very good positive message, not only for those investors that are currently here, but also for those that are contemplating entering Ukraine following this presidential campaign as well.
Yeah, of course, and there's probably a lot of them. And I know that
hopefully
everyone is going to be looking at the first 100 days of the presidency. This is what everyone focuses on. So hopefully after that, we'll have you back in the studio and we can talk more. Thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. That was Yaroslav Gregirchak, the Deputy Business Ombudsman for Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more here on UATV.